shall I just choose one? Let's just choose one and then we can get the ball rolling. I mean, this one on the top left is quite interesting. How can substances be used to promote well-being, which I think is something you mentioned, Emma, in your talk, but I don't think you had much chance to sort of...
I didn't, but I think Catherine probably picked up on it later, in a sense that it's more about the idea of a sort of thinking about well-being in the kind of short term, and how substance use could be a way of kind of coping and blocking out trauma and blocking out abuse, rather than kind of a holistic strategy for maintaining well-being. Often those, as we've heard from other papers, are ones that can become a threat to well-being through ongoing problematic relationships, for example. So that's the kind of thing I was thinking of, and the way that kind of had been silenced in the kind of policy discourse because of the way in which those who use substances are often seen as people who are irresponsible, if people have not made the right choices. They have made choices, but not necessarily the ones that they're expected to make to kind of manage their health and well-being.
Does anybody want to follow up on that, Jeff?
Sorry, no, it was a different point.
Does anybody want to follow up on that kind of thing when we move on to... Jeff, did you want to ask something?
Well, drugs are not fun. I mean, is another,
Yeah.
But I think that I was reminded for the first time in some time as why I'm an academic, and it's so fantastic to hear people talking about gender responsive treatment. Because I worked as an addictions counsellor for a couple of years in an abstinence-focused long-term programme in which we expected people to be in full-time intensive group treatment. About 75-80% of our intake was men. We expected people to live in a shared hospital, mixed gender, mostly, and we had no women graduate whatsoever over a period of about 2, 3, 4 years. In fact, literally not a single woman graduating. We're delivering no gender responsive treatment. It was gender blind. We're expecting people to be intimate in a group with men who they knew for a very long time. It was literally catastrophic. I can remember going to my boss and saying, look, we're doing something wrong here, and being told we're getting the wrong women through the door. And feeling so angry at that. And I went away, some of you might or might not know Lorraine Gell's talk, but it was to study with her and study drug treatment of women. But that complete lack of responsiveness that left me so angry back then. It's the first time I've been reminded of that in some time, and it's so good to hear these far more gender responsive accounts, and that's really all I wanted to put out.
I mean, I think that is sadly, that reflection and that picture of services is still the case in a lot of places, which is quite depressing. But I regularly hear from people describing those kind of circumstances and worse. So I was speaking to one drug worker who's worked in a service in the northeast, and she was recounting how it was a mixed gender service and they largely men, and they'd have women come in to use the services with very visible signs of abuse, things like black eyes and broken, knocked out teeth, really horrendous. And she said how it was kind of just seen as a part of a chaotic lifestyle and dismissed, rather than there obviously being very visible signs of abuse, much of which was being perpetrated by men who were using the same services. And that just wasn't being thought about because the service wasn't thinking in a gendered way. And I think, as I said, whether you're working with men or with women, you need to kind of understand that gendered context, particularly if you're working with both, many of whom might be in relationships with each other. You need to be services do need to be doing more, and I don't think it's acceptable actually to say wrong women or to ignore those signs of abuse. I think all services could be doing more, and I do appreciate the pressures on services, and I think that was an important point to make, but for me that kind of underlines the importance of being more efficient and effective in how we deliver services. These things don't all have a big price tag attached to them, but they are just about kind of understanding the realities for men and women and how services can work in a more effective way with both.
Karen, do you want to add to that?
I think I absolutely agree. It's still the situation, and it's a policy initiative, but it's also for providers to understand and understand what's happening in their services and really think about that, and then think about how you can amend and change practice, and listen to the people using your services. Phoenix wasn't always great at supporting women in our mixed services. We're much better now. Actually, our female completion rates are high across all of our residentials than for men. But now then, that raises an issue for me. Okay, how can we use the lessons that we've developed to improve that practice with women and apply those to men? And it's about understanding. That's going to ring with me now. That wrong woman. It's wrong service. For whatever reason, it's wrong service. Either delivered in a wrong way or not the most appropriate service for that individual. Women that talk to me that have been in and out of treatment for a long time told me so many different cases of disclosing abuse for the first time for 20 years, and it's the environment and the staff and the interventions and the support from the other women that enable them to do that. There's a fantastic, just a really good snapshot of that on our. We had a Radio 5 live piece that went into Grace House, and there's a story there from a woman that gives exactly that account. That being in that environment was the first time that enabled her to be able to talk about it. But similar issues for men, and all that sort of the guilt and the shame. It's from a different perspective, but. You do need to really think about how you are delivering those services from a gender perspective.
I think that flows quite well into these issues around stigma, which was driven through all of your papers actually, the issue of stigma, and perhaps a sort of double stigmatisation for women as they're involved with drug use. The question in the middle, whether or not there's still an issue with health professionals stigmatising women in treatment, and what we can do about moving on from that.
I think there is, and we see countless kind of tuts and eye rolls. Oh, they've just gone back to them again, and we can't help them because they've gone back to them. And actually, we're not looking at why are they going back to them. Is it because as services are we not meeting their needs, and their abuser is? And I think we do need to think outside the box about that, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a real. Services working with women with addiction are going to be working with women who are or have been in abusive situations, like definitely. Now, services need to recognise that and to understand the dynamics of abuse, and that includes understanding, why doesn't she just leave? I don't think that's really an acceptable response from services. They need to understand what abusive situations are like, the dynamics of power and control, the kind of removal of self-agency, the kind of destruction of someone's sense of self that comes with, as well as the kind of practical barriers towards women leaving, and the very real fear that if women do leave, that's for many women the time when they're most at risk and when a lot of homicides happen. So, services working with women in those situations have to understand those dynamics, and sadly, I don't think they do. And that doesn't mean necessarily, if you can't have the specialisms in-house, it's about making links with other services in the area that are providing the kind of support to women. But I don't think services can just ignore the fact that most women they see in addiction services will have those backgrounds and histories, if not currently be in abusive situations. And that's such a critical thing that services just need to be a bit more on top of that, I think.
And I think I touched on some of the exclusions. Some of the exclusions that are that providers create for themselves, and that it creates stigma. It may come from a position of stigmatising certain groups, but I think it comes a little bit more from a sense of understanding and confidence. So the amount of services that will exclude women with substance misuse who have been in prison, or women with substance misuse issues that have mental health issues, the women that I talk to and understand their lives, of course they've got mental health issues, and those experiences have created those mental health issues, but also then have created those addiction issues. So if we events like this, conversations, really understanding how we can deliver those services with confidence, not being too judgmental when people get it wrong, because that's how we learn, and that's how we are going to allow ourselves to share that learning. But I think a lot of it is about understanding and confidence. It then creates stigma and a stigmatised approach, but there is plenty of help that organisations can get.
And I think there's something particular around stigma around prostitution or sex work, which means that a lot of women won't disclose in a service, and that can, that obviously has a real role in their substance misuse often. So I think services need to be thinking a bit about that. And I've been out to visit a couple of our member organisations. Agenda's members work specifically with women involved in prostitution in different contexts in different cities, and it's been really interesting going out to visit a few of them recently, because they've spoken about how in some areas, some cities, you have a very visible street-based prostitution issue, but increasingly it's not visible. It's the kind of things you were mentioning, both that kind of informal exchange, but also indoor brothels or massage parlours, people working from kind of different settings. The internet and that ability to kind of communicate with people in a different way has opened up a whole different side to the sex trade, so it is a lot more hidden, and there are huge links for women with addiction and prostitution, and there's massive stigma around that still.
And significant levels of vulnerability.
Absolutely,
Really vulnerable.
And including sort of immigration status and things like that will further negate their ability to come forward in this way. There's a couple of questions about the family drug and alcohol court, sorry Jennifer, which actually I thought was very interesting as well, that there seems to be restriction on women with quite complex needs and domestic violence experience not being able to access that service. Can you say a little bit more about that?
I guess it wouldn't, I suppose because it's a very finite time frame, it would be unfair, and I don't think anyone would kind of agree with putting somebody who has complex mental health issues through a 26-week detox effectively.
Right.
It wouldn't be that they would be excluded from support, absolutely not, but it would just be that the FDAC per se wouldn't apply to them, just because that's...
So that might be something that further forward they could still engage in.
They would still be able to access treatment, and I suppose I can't comment on what social services decisions would be regarding the care of their children, but possibly if they have complex mental health issues and they are impacting upon their ability to parent, then it's not just a substance misuse issue that's affecting their ability to parent, and that's what FDAC's for. It's just for the substance abuse, where if you remove the substance abuse problem, their parenting would be okay.
Any questions from the floor? Yes.
It's not really a question, it's more of a thought about the way in which we accidentally stigmatise women, because we don't work with men enough around issues like, do you have children, are you sexually active, do you have a partner, have you ever been in a position where you felt you may have been abusive to your partner, and actually encouraging that work with the males that are in your treatment services, which doesn't necessarily mean investing more money. It's actually doing more work with the 3/4 of the treatment services clients, which are male.
Absolutely.
Who are the ones who are repeatedly having the children with these women that we work with.
Absolutely. I think Gail Gilchrist is speaking this afternoon. Oh, hello, Gail. Who's done loads of research into this area, but I think it's I think it's so important because a high proportion of men in substance misuse services do have histories of perpetration of abuse and violence. Also men in prison and men in other settings, and it's really not tackled at all.
And just to add on to that as well, when you look at the NDTMS results that come through, one of the areas that we have the poorest data quality on is completing the parental questions. Are you a parent? Do you live with children? So that's another question out there to services, and I'm not pointing any fingers because I think it's one of those things that accidentally we're trapped to fall into, of asking women all the time these questions. But it's about, getting to the bottom of this. It's about the whole of our clients in treatment, not just focusing this on the women.
And it's about responsibility, isn't
Yeah.
it? So by focusing it on the women, you're holding them responsible for changing that situation rather than getting off with carrying on.
We do like a home visit for every. We started initially for every service user with a child under 2. We go and visit them at home, and we have a chat about how they're storing medication safely, etc. That's the primary purpose of it. But it does open up into those kind of talks, really into domestic arrangements, etc. And we're extending that to a child under 10, where we'll go and see everyone at home.
But I think it's as important to go and do domestic visits with male clients.
Oh yeah, we do with anyone. Yeah, anyone who has a child in the home. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just picking up. It was a question that
Yes,
I wanted to already
go
on the
for it.
board
Yeah,
anyway.
go
I
for it.
didn't write it, but I wanted to ask as well. So, this is how positive are the experiences of children whose parents are in residential treatment, and then the second part to that as well is you offer the residential treatment. Is there an age limit for children? So would you offer it to like teenagers, and what's their experience as well as sort of secondary?
We don't. I think the for the family service at the moment, I think it's 8 or 10. It's more around what we can accommodate and the need for rooms, and obviously depending on the size of the family and how many children there are. I saw that question, and it's a brilliant question. No, we haven't done any work. We will. We've got a lot of anecdotal evidence around the development of the children, because we've got Ofsted registered creche in the service. So they've got a huge amount of data, but I've not collected it. So I'm going to. Thank you.
And do they offer support as well?
The children.
Yeah.
Well, through play, and we've done a piece of work which I'm hoping will be aired soon, which will really give you a good insight into the work that goes on within the family service. But yeah, there's a huge amount of emphasis on the child development from our sort of qualified children's workers, and the parents report that they can see their improvement. The children act as a mirror, so when they see their children improving and their behaviour improving and sort of the level of emotional distress reducing, and how they're able to interact with other children and play, and that gives them a really good measure of how they then themselves are progressing through their treatment. It's fascinating talking to the parents about how they monitor their own development through their observations of their children's development. And there was another question as well in terms of how many parents are reunited with children afterwards, and we do have that. I don't know what that figure is, but we'll look into that too.
Any other questions out there? One you put up on the board?
Yeah, I just want to support Jenny in the statement she's making around cuts to treatment and funding. It's like I've worked in treatment for 9 years and actually worked at the same service as these guys. And Jenny, and I think the stuff we can talk about in the room here when you get a lot of academics together, policymakers together, people that are clearly interested in the subject, makes a lot of sense, and we can say, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, the points you guys were making at the end are spot on. But the problem is in treatment, because services are so rammed and because there's not an infrastructure in place to standardise treatment, you can go up and down the country and you get different responses. As Lizzie knows from Portugal, for Bob, that's where we work. You know, like wherever you work, wherever you work in the country, you give different responses to those questions you brought today. And that's because drug treatment isn't standardised. There's no recognised way of working with people. Like, there's a question on the board saying, is addiction disease or a choice, which just shows how far we are from even understanding what. The fact we have to ask that is crazy. Like, that question's answered. But in drug treatment, people ask that same question too, and I think that's because there's no set way of working. There's no like course or diploma you can do that would answer these questions. Like, imagine if that existed. You know, if you had to do a diploma to work in drug treatment, you would come into the job knowing all this stuff. But that doesn't happen. And there's not the money in the sector. Like the York budget's got like a 25% cut over 5 years, and then it had a 25% cut before they even released the data. So the service that a lot of these guys work for is taking a huge blow. And recovery coordinators, as these guys know, you go into work, you do an MI course, CBT course, and then there's a caseload of 50 really complex people that have got all these issues, and there isn't the time to get this information.
And it's not just your agency, but it's all the other agencies that might be able to help as well.
And all those cuts have been like stealth cut by the Tories as well, because it's like, it's really hard to see how much services have been cut because of the NTA's discipline. It's difficult. It's almost like a cut that's done under the radar. People don't really realise it's happening through treatment.
And what's happening is drug-related deaths have gone up 107% in the last year.
And no manifesto has mentioned it, which is interesting, isn't it? I'm sorry. Let's not talk about politics.
I'll just get really depressed if we do that, but I think it's a really important point that we can have very idealised visions for treatment, but on the ground it's a lot more difficult to meet those challenges, although it's great to hear that, you know, with Phoenix Futures and others that we are managing.
It is, I completely recognise that, and you know, we hear all the time from people about the kind of pressures they're under, and I think, you know, we should never put the finger at frontline workers because you're doing an incredibly difficult job. I do think there's something kind of systemic though about where we're spending our money, and kind of particularly when we are doing it in a way where we're not delivering the most effective services, and so people are ending up in different parts of the system, which is hugely costly, whether that's kind of prison or, you know, A&E or whatever. I think there has to be a more intelligent way of thinking about how we provide
a lot of those
services.
contracts ain't really sustainable though. So you think about the organisation we used to work for, it doesn't even exist anymore. Like Lifeline doesn't even exist as a service. And I know that what's happened there is going to come out in the wash, but you speak to like Paul Hayes from Collective Voice, like he'll raise a lot of concerns around many contracts you apply for just aren't financially viable. So drug treatment services have to apply and get contracts, knowing they're going to lose money, but they need that contract just to get the money in. But in the long term, they know they're going to lose. So, you know, that just the way the whole services are commissioned just means that these organisations, as you well know, you know, for Phoenix Futures, like it's just a bit of a battle even to stay afloat. And then a lot of the issues we're talking about today, the last thing on the list is a CEO. You want to keep services afloat, don't you? Procure contracts. No. Sorry, I feel really negative.
That's not the last thing.
Get it all right. It's gonna work out.
Well, that's good. Let's finish there then. Can you join us in thanking our speakers this morning? Fantastic.